Welcome to the Reality Revolution. Today, I wanted to discuss a fascinating concept and a very powerful chapter in the book Reality Transurfing. If you have not heard of it, Reality Transurfing, parts 1 through 5, is a book written by Vadim Zeland, a physicist from Russia that explores spiritual and practical examples of how to create and maneuver through different realities. It captures an entire system of thought and action that can help propel you and find new realities that are really phenomenal. It's changed my life. It's changed many people that I've met. The concepts that are used in it are in many ways universal, and then there's some very unique concepts. One of my favorite concepts that's discussed in this book is the idea of the mirror world and the idea of the waking dream. Really discussing, are we in a dream when we're awake? And is there a waking dream? Is there a threshold where we can interact with our reality while we're awake, much like we do in a dream? This is discussed in many chapters in the book, particularly in the discussion of intention, helping you to understand that lucid dreaming can help you to understand intention. Well, there's a lot more to it, and there's a lot more discussion of when we're truly aware and when we're awake. And we start to see the beginnings of an understanding of the plait, and really the full basis, tracing all the way back to Carlos Castaneda and Toltec wisdom, which may be wisdom that goes beyond our own current history. So I wanted to discuss this chapter, and by doing it, it will expand our ability to create realities when we interplay this with the stuff that we already know and have discussed on the Reality Revolution. The chapter is The Dreams of the Gods. And the quote is, "I take care of my world," implying control over reality. And it begins with the discussion of the two sides to reality. From time immemorial, people have understood that the world has a dual nature. On the one hand, everything that happens on the material level can more or less be understood and explained from the point of view of the natural sciences. On the other hand, when we encounter phenomena from the subtle planes, the laws cease to be applicable. Why is it that we are unable to unite different aspects of reality into a single knowledge system? It's a strange picture. It is as if the world plays hide and seek with humanity, not wishing to reveal its true essence. Hardly have scientists discovered a law to explain one phenomena, then a new phenomenon is observed that seems to contradict it. The search for the slippery truth is like a shadow, so long it goes on forever. The interesting thing is that the world is not only hiding its true identity, it is also readily takes on the image assigned to it. This is the case with all fields of the natural sciences. For example, if you imagine that an object of the micro world is a particle, then there will undoubtedly be experiments to prove it. If you imagine that it is not a particle but an electromagnetic wave, the world will not protest but willingly reveal itself in the corresponding manner. Now watch how Zeland is using the word imagination. More and more I read Reality Transurfing. I believe that Zeland is 100% with Neville Goddard's teaching on imagination in the way that he uses the word imagination. You can ask the world what it is made of with equal success. If you ask whether the substance it is made up of is matter, that has mass, it will reply yes. If you ask whether it is not in fact made up of energy, it will again answer in the affirmative. As you know, in a vacuum, there is a continual process taking place of the birth and annihilation of microparticles as energy is transformed into matter and vice versa. There's no point to asking the world what is primary, matter or consciousness. It will cunningly change its masks, turning towards us with the side we wish to see. Representatives of different teachings will argue amongst themselves, trying to prove conflicting points of view, but reality always comes up with its dispassionate verdict. Essentially, they are all right. So it turns out that the world does not just slip away from us. It agrees with us. In other words, it behaves like a mirror in which literally all our ideas surrounding the nature of reality are reflected. And here we begin to discuss in Transurfing the idea of the mirror reality. This is before the chapter on the mirror world, but it's one of the most powerful aspects of the Transurfing model. The idea that reality behaves like a mirror. In a recent interview that I did with Jude Currivan, in a wonderful book, Jude Currivan writes about the cosmic hologram and the way that the universe is made up of information and is essentially a hologram. And one of the principles that she has in the book of co-creation, in the way the universe co-creates itself, is the principle of reflection. This holographic nature is part of the mirror world and teaching that Zeland is giving. It behaves like a mirror in which literally all our ideas surrounding the nature of reality are reflected. So what are we left with? The world always agrees with our observations of it and yet avoids giving us a direct answer. Are all-out attempts to explain the nature of reality to be in vain? It's like a story I give on another episode of the judge, where one person comes forward and argues their case, and the judge says, yes, I agree. And the other person fights and says, how could you do this? You didn't give us a chance to answer, and then makes a spectacular case, and the judge says, yes, I agree. And then the clerk says, well, you can't do this. You can't have both be right. And the judge says, yes, I agree. So this is what's happening in the mirror reflection idea, is that everything is reflected back, no matter what. It's going to agree with you. The world always agrees with our observations of it and yet avoids giving us a direct answer. Are all-out attempts to explain the nature of reality to be in vain? It is all actually much simpler than it seems. There's no point in searching for the absolute truth in individual manifestations of a reality that is multifaceted. We have to accept the fact that reality is like a dual mirror that has two sides. One that is physical, that can be touched, and the other metaphysical that lies beyond perception, but which is no less objective. At the present time, science deals with what is reflected in the mirror, whilst esotericism tries to peek at the other side. This is what the argument about the nature of reality comes down to. So what is hidden on the reverse side of the dual mirror? The alternative space is what is to be found on the other side of the mirror. We're just seeing reflections from the alternative space, which is why I believe meditations are so powerful. When you access the alternative space and you visualize something, you're creating something that the mirror can reflect back to you. It's that simple. Play around with it. That information structure in which the scripts of all possible events are contained. And here we get the idea of the Eternity Archive mentioned in Tufti the Priestess, where he's talking about scripts of all possible events are contained. So the space behind the mirror, the alternative space, is the Eternity Archive. The number of alternative realities is infinite, just as the number of possible coordinate points on a graph is infinite. The alternative space records everything that ever was, is, or will be. The event that actually takes place in the physical world, that actually takes place, represents the material realization of one of those many alternatives. This might be difficult to believe. Where exactly is the alternative space? How can this be possible? This is a question that I have asked, and I've even asked other people in my interviews. Where does the alternative space exist? Where is the quantum field? So Zeland asks the same question. And from the perspective of the three dimensions, the alternative space is everywhere, and at the same time, nowhere at all. It could lie beyond the limits of the visible universe, or it could be in your coffee cup. Either way, it is not to be found in the third dimension. The paradox lies in the fact that we all go to the alternative space every night. Dreams are not illusions in the normal sense of the word. We carelessly attribute our dreams to the realm of fantasy without suspecting that they reflect real events which could have their place in the past or the future. Imagine that. All those crazy dreams that you've had, they're all real. They're parts of the alternative space. They may be so ludicrous they don't actually end up being reflected back, but they exist as templates inside the alternative space. So if you've had a crazy dream where you ran around and your face was a rabbit, there's a template for that in the alternative space. And so think about this wonderful thought. While you're sleeping, your soul is exploring freely this alternative space. Your soul cannot wait for you to go to sleep, and it will make you tired and take your energy just to dip its toe into the alternative space. It's like the ultimate Xbox, the greatest video game. You can go and explore any universe. Well, we can't do that when we're awake. Our soul does that. And we may not know in many cases what our soul is doing. Our soul may just be freely exploring, or like going through the library looking at material. It does not have to resonate as true meaning, or it can. What I've been doing is advising and asking my inner guardian, my soul, before I sleep. If you listen to some of the sleep meditations, same thing. I'm asking my soul to help me to have dreams that are directly related to my timeline and help me and benefit me. I do believe you can intentionally create dreams. I've done it several times. I've had amazing conversations with people. You know, I wanted to talk about business, so I've had dreams where I had conversations with businessmen in my dream. You can have, and it's kind of the idea that Napoleon Hill is talking about in Think and Grow Rich, where he talks about the beginnings of the mastermind. But he wasn't talking about having masterminds, which he was a little, where you can have masterminds with other people. He was also talking about having masterminds within yourself, with what are imaginary people. But by doing this, you can take a solution. You can find solutions to problems that are pretty amazing. And the paradox lies in the fact that we all go to the alternative space every night. Dreams are not illusions. We know that in dreams people see pictures that do not seem to be of this world. Sometimes people see things in dreams that they quite obviously could never have seen anywhere before. If a dream is like the brain's imitation of reality, then where does it get these incredible pictures and stories? If we conveniently attribute the conscious aspect of the human psyche to the mind and the subconscious aspect of the human psyche to the soul, then you could say that dreaming is the flight of the soul into the alternative space. The mind does not imagine its dreams. It genuinely sees them. Now just stop for a second and think about that. The mind does not imagine its dreams. It's seeing them. You're not creating it. You're not this incredible movie producer. Some of the details that we have in our dreams are so amazing. The soul has direct access to the information field, where all scripts and sceneries are permanently stored like frames on a film roll. Where have we heard that before? We've heard that in Tufti the Priestess. The phenomenon of time, the development of events, appears only in the process of the film roll moving. The mind plays the role of observer and ideas generator. Memory has the same direct relationship to the alternative space. It has already been proved that the mind is not physically capable of retaining all the information as it accumulates over a lifetime. There's no way that it can retain all that information. So how does the mind memorize? Rather than retaining the information itself, it keeps a kind of address for the data in the alternative space. So think about that. Your understanding of memory is that it's locked somewhere inside some chemicals in your brain. Do you believe that? We already know by looking at neuroplasticity, people have damaged parts of their brain and not lost chunks of their memory. Their memory is not local to one particular area, but memory is non-local according to this model. So the memory is stored outside of your mind. So when you're losing your memory, you're not losing conscious working function of your brain. Your brain is losing its connection to the alternative space. It has already been proved that the mind is not physically capable of retaining all the information. It accumulates over a lifetime. Imagine how much stuff you've forgotten, but you could access it. Go back to a weird time, for instance, that you haven't really thought about. There's always some time. Maybe it was in college, or maybe it was in high school. Maybe there's some year that you've kind of just glossed over. Start working your details into it, really remembering all of the different aspects of it, and it will start coming back to you. Is that long-term memory, or is that us accessing the alternative space through our minds? The mind is not capable of creating anything fundamentally new. Remember that. Your mind is not going to create anything. It can only compile a new version of a house from old bricks. All scientific discoveries and masterpieces are received by the mind from the alternative space via the soul. So clairvoyance and intuitive knowledge are received in the same way and from the same place. No scientific discovery, wrote Einstein, is made by means of the logical mind. It only acquires logical form later when you describe it. Every discovery, even very small ones, are always an insight. The solution always comes from the outside and unexpectedly, as if someone had hinted it. The alternative space should not be confused with the popular concept of the common information field in which data can be shifted from one object to another. The alternative space, or the space of variations, I don't know why they changed it, is a stationary matrix, a structure which defines everything that is or that could possibly take place in the physical world. As yet, mainstream science is unable to explain or confirm the existence of the alternative space. Quite the opposite, in fact. Science will try to discredit the transurfing model, which is not surprising because official science is a typical pendulum. Generally speaking, science, for all its indubitable merits and achievements, is prone to brush to one side anything that does not fit into its framework. When it encounters anything that defies explanation, it wriggles every which way, accusing its opponents of being charlatans, of juggling the facts, or of simply ignoring the obvious. Anything to remain on its pedestal of granite. There was one person, however, academic Vyacheslav Bronnikov, who managed to completely snooker science by combining the totally incredible with the more than obvious. Children taught at the International Academy of Human Development created by Bronnikov demonstrated extraordinary abilities. These individuals are capable of seeing with their eyes closed just as well as when they're open. They can memorize huge volumes of information. They have the gift of clairvoyance and can perceive distant objects as clearly as through a telescope. It is difficult to believe, but a fact is a fact. They see through walls as if there were no obstacles there at all. How do they do it? Neurophysiologists who carry out research into the effect of direct vision describe their observations in the following way. In normal sight, the apparatus registers the area where the signal enters, its movement in the brain, and how it is processed. In the case of direct vision, the point of entry is not registered, and there is no apparent movement of the signal in the brain, and yet the equipment very precisely register that the signal is processed. All attempts to block signal entry to the brainwave gave a negative result. We are discovering something that displays features totally unrelated to electromagnetic processes. It appears that the brain is capable of seeing without the means of an apparatus of sight. And I can tell you this from personal experience. When I became a certified hypnotist, one of the craziest things was I would see a hypnotist hypnotize somebody with a blindfold on and then tell them that they could see something, and they could. And to realize that there was this limitation of the brain that you can see without your eyes, which is an amazing thing. I've seen people do it that have been hypnotized to do it. I also have seen David Wilcock mention it in his book that discusses the idea of the source field investigations. So it's all attempts to block the signal entry have failed, and it appears that the brain is capable of seeing without the means of this apparatus. So how should this be interpreted? Bronnikov describes this phenomenon in terms of a connection, the conscious mind, and something he calls a higher conscious mind. Higher consciousness, he writes, lies outside of the human mind as a kind of environment. You probably guessed already that in the context of transurfing, this environment is understood to be the alternative space. It does not really matter how one refers to it. The essence remains the same. The mind, or if you prefer the brain, sees what is in the alternative space by means of the soul. Whereas the eyes observe physical reality. In the case of direct vision, the brain attunes to the metaphysical information field where quite literally the entire mold of physical reality is stored, like when we're dreaming. Because we see things when we're dreaming, so the soul just tunes in to the information space where it's happening now, as it's happening, and that's how it can see. Once you have access to this bank of data, you can perceive objects irrespective of where they are physically located, behind a wall, under the ground, or many miles away. I've experimented with this, trying to use sight to look behind walls, and I've had some success with it. If you've had success, put a note in the comments. I'd love to hear your stories. People have been able to do incredible things like that. The alternative space just consists of both of the areas that have been manifest as material reality and areas that have not been realized. In order to develop direct vision, you have to learn to perceive the current realized sector. From a physiological point of view, this could be interpreted as a certain synchronization between both hemispheres of the brain. So Zeland is saying that this realization, this ability to see, comes from both hemispheres being synchronized. That's interesting. So we can add some exercises to synchronize our hemispheres, and that might help. Bronikov developed an entire system of special and at the same time very straightforward exercises enabling ordinary individuals to develop these abilities. So Zeland then recommends to find relevant information on the internet and to try it out ourselves. And so, because this is a podcast, we're going to do that very thing. So it's interesting, Vadim recommends looking up on the internet this doctor that I was just discussing from the book Reality Transurfing. So, of course, I paused it and went down the rabbit hole. So it's very interesting to read about. The Bronikov method has several articles on the internet, and Vyacheslav Bronikov founded an international academy, as we discussed. Now, one of the articles said it's very cult-like. Bronikov received information he needed to teach these skills from Tibetan monks while asleep. There's many training books with Bronikov cells, training academies in the Ukraine and US, and ideally needs you to devote 20 to 30 years of your life to learning. And of course, these courses aren't cheap at around $10,000 for a 3-week course. Bronikov's academy claims to teach people how to develop photographic memory, the ability not to get ill. And there's the skill that Darren Brown looks into in this one particular documentary, which I recommend watching. If you have ever watched Darren Brown, there's an episode of his show where he goes and investigates these techniques, and I have to say it doesn't look good. They're saying that some of the claims are a little bit fishy. There may be a lot more to it. The different articles I read in the Darren Brown special that I just watched puts a little bit of this into question. But as Zeland says, he's not saying anything. He asks us to go and look for ourselves. I think that it may not work to actually x-ray, see if it's understood. I think we can get glimpses, but we don't have constant contact. And you couldn't use this system to overcome blindness, for instance. one of the people interviewing him does ask, and he says, we're not healing anybody. So I don't know. We'll make what to make of that. But that is interesting. Zeland says it is all very possible. The alternative space stores information about all possible alternatives of the past and future, which means that access to this field also develops the ability for clairvoyance. The only problem with clairvoyance is that an infinite number of alternatives exist, and so one can also see events that will never be realized in the physical world. This is why clairvoyants sometimes make mistakes in their prognosis, for they can also see things that have never been and things that will never happen. In this sense, you can rest assured that no one can know your future, because no one can determine which alternative will eventually be realized. Likewise, there is no guarantee that in a dream you see the sector of the field which will become streamed into physical reality. This is great because it means that the future is not fatally predetermined and we can continue to hope for the best. The task of transurfing is not to look at the past with regret of the future, with uncertainty, but to intentionally create your own reality. Under certain circumstances, human thought energy is capable of materializing a given sector of the alternative space, under the condition that in transurfing is referred to as unity of heart and mind. The magical power of outer intention, which, remember, a guiding principle in reading the book Reality Transurfing is when you hear the words outer intention, just replace it with God. I think that it's almost like Zeland wrote this once and took out the word God and put in outer intention. And so when you read it, it becomes even more powerful when you take that. So transurfing is referred to as unity of heart and mind. The magical power of God is born, which is what turns a possible future into reality, or the magical power of outer intention. Everything that is usually associated with magic has a direct relationship to outer intention. It is with the help of this magical power that the ancients constructed the Egyptian pyramids and created other similar miracles. It's interesting. I have a recent episode called The Law of One, and there's a discussion possibly of an alien race that used this type of power to create the pyramids. Maybe he's referring to the Law of One. I'm not sure. This type of intention is called outer intention because it is located outside of the human being and is not subject to the human mind. True, in a certain condition, human consciousness is capable of gaining access to it. If you subject your own will to this mighty force, you can create unbelievable things. However, modern man has long lost the type of abilities possessed by the inhabitants of ancient civilizations such as Atlantis. Fragments of ancient knowledge have survived to the present day in the form of scattered esoteric teachings and practices. Applying this knowledge to everyday life is relatively difficult, and yet it's not impossible. In transurfing, there are indirect methods which can help you to get outer intention to work in other ways. People are capable of shaping their own reality, but you have to observe certain rules. Your ordinary state of mind tries unsuccessfully to manipulate the reflection in the mirror, whereas that you must do is change the actual image. The image is the focus and nature of your thoughts. In order to transform what is desired into reality, desire itself is not enough. You need to know how to work with a dual mirror, and then you will learn how to create your own reality. You will have to fundamentally undermine the monolith of so-called common sense, which in actual fact is not very commonsensical at all. if you can accept that two sides to reality exist simultaneously, the physical and the metaphysical old stereotypes will crumble, and the picture of the world will become clearer. Dualism is an integral part of our reality. For example, the soul relates to the alternative space and the mind to the material world. Inner intention relates to the material reality and outer intention to the virtual sectors of the alternative space. When these two aspects of reality connect on the surface of the mirror, phenomena arise that are referred to as paranormal or unexplained. An obvious example of the connection between the two sides to reality is the wave-particle dualism that occurs when a micro-object behaves either as a wave or as a particle, as we talk about in physics. The birth and annihilation of microparticles in a vacuum is another example of a borderline condition in which reality fluctuates between physical and metaphysical form. However, the most surprising example is human beings who simultaneously combine in ourselves the material and the spiritual. In one sense, you could say that we are living on the surface of a gigantic mirror, which has our material universe on one side and the black eternity of the alternative space on the other. In such a unique position, it would be at best short-sighted to live within the limits of the conventional worldview and use only one side of reality, the physical side. You will learn how to work with the dual mirror of the world and how to accomplish these things that would previously have seemed impossible. You will be convinced, yet, that your potential is limited only by your intention. The waking dream. When a potential possibility is manifested as reality, the surface of the dual mirror shows a symmetrical image. The sector of the metaphysical alternative space lies on one side of the mirror, and its material manifestation lies on the other. All living beings are balanced on the edge of the mirror because their body and mind relate to the material world while their soul remains inseparably connected to the alternative space. We all came into this life from the alternative space, and we all return to the alternative space as if to the wings of a stage for a costume change, to then reappear on the surface of the mirror in a new guise. In this theater of masks, the actors return to a never-ending cycle of parts. Having played in one role, the actor runs backstage for a minute, puts on a different mask, and once again re-enters the game, having completely forgotten anything that happened prior to his latest appearance on stage. The actor is so immersed in the image of the character they are playing that they lose all sense of who they are as an individual. Sometimes the wool falls away from the actor's eyes, and they suddenly become aware that this is not their first life here on the stage. Ian Stevenson, American professor of psychiatry, gathered more than 2,500 registered cases of remembered past lives in which the majority of respondents were children. Without the medium of hypnosis, the children gave accounts of their lives in the distant past and other countries. In his books, Ian Stevenson quotes extremely interesting facts. There was one particularly characteristic story of two twin brothers who spoke to each other in an unintelligible language. At first, everyone thought it was just childish sounds until they were 3 years old. Their parents finally realized that something was not right. the brothers were shown to linguists who were surprised to find that the children were speaking to each other in Old Aramaic, a language widely spoken during the time of Christ, but which is today no longer spoken. All right, so I'm going to pause it and come back, and I'm going to check this out and back check this with you so I can confirm this story. It would appear that Ian Stevenson is a legitimate researcher and has studied twin pairs with a number of different studies and additional information beyond the information given by Vadim Zeland. So this particular source citing is very interesting. Another example is of a Yugoslavian girl who became ill and was unconscious for a period of time, and when she came around, she could no longer recognize the people around her and spoke in a foreign language. Specialists established that the language she was speaking was a Bengali dialect. The child asked to be taken home to India. When the girl was taken to the town she had named, she recognized her house. However, it turned out the parents and the little girl had passed away long ago. There are numerous stories about children similar to these. But the same thing also happens to adults. A 27-year-old woman traveling with her husband through Germany was surprised to find that she recognized the places they were visiting, although she was there for the first time. She even saw her own home and could remember the names of her parents and brothers. At the local pub, the woman recognized an old man who had known her family and told her of the tragic accident in which a horse had kicked up one of its hooves and killed the family's little daughter. The woman expanded on his story in minute detail. In his book, Do We Only Live Once, Andrzej Donamiski describes the experiments of an English psychiatrist, Arnold Blacksman, who used hypnosis to help patients return to past lives. One of his patients recounted in detail 6 past incarnations. In the first, she was the wife of a tutor to a Roman alderman in England, then the wife of a Jewish usurer, then a servant girl in the house of a merchant Paris. She was also a dame at the court of the Spanish Infante at Castile, a London seamstress, and a nun living in one of the states of America. And all these lives were lived over the course of 2 millennia. Historians carefully checked the dates and events she described and confirmed everything. That is pretty fascinating. It's interesting that she reincarnated as a woman every time. So I definitely recommend you check out my past life regression hypnosis on the channel in the guided meditations playlist. I've had great success. People have reported having some incredible reconciling with events that occurred and remembering different things with it. It's standard script for a normal past life regression with some good music involved. And you should try and see if you see anything. If you consider all these facts, there can hardly be any doubt in the existence of reincarnation. There's just one thing that leaves me undecided, according to Zeland. Why are cases of remembered past lives so rare and occur in such small number of people? People mainly remember past lives in their early childhood, but with time, they are erased from memory. To be more specific, it is not the memories are erased so much as that awareness is blocked. Everyone can remember their past incarnations if they wake up from the daydream of life. We know that up until the age of 4, a child is incapable of distinguishing a dream from reality. It may be that children can also recall their past lives, but the rational worldview is strongly imposed upon them before they become aware of it. Also, very few people have any memories before the age of 4. Why is that? Why is this, do you think? Is it because the child is irrational, not yet self-aware? No, this is a great common delusion. For in reality, awareness in children is much higher than it is in adults. It is the adults who become immersed in the subconscious daydream, and as a result, unable to recall their past lives or their early childhood. Let us look how this happens. When the soul is reborn into a new body, it sits in the background whilst the mind takes the leading position. Now, this is a very important concept for you to get. It's mentioned in Transurfing. When people talk about and they used the word ego, that's your mind. The ego is a computer, and the real part of you is sitting back. So when people say things like your thoughts are not you, your thoughts are the computer. The computer is going to tell you that you're guilty. The computer is going to give you negative information, flight or fight. It's designed to survive. So in the background, the mind takes the leading position, and the soul just chills. The soul is the heart. So what is the mind? From the moment of birth, the mind is a clean sheet of paper on which anything can be written. From the very beginning, a template is placed onto the sheet in accordance with which the individual perceives themselves and the reality of their day-to-day life. The more detailed the template is, the greater the chasm between the heart and mind. An individual's awareness of reality will be exactly what they've been taught it should be like. Awareness can be divided into two levels. The first is attention, and the second is perception. In the initial period after birth, perception has not been clouded by anything external, and so the child's ability for intuition and clairvoyance are wide open. In other words, the child has direct access to information from the alternative space and perceives the world just as it is. However, dream-seeing adults take the newborn in hand and immediately squeeze it into the narrow dream framework they take to be conscious existence. This is achieved by limiting the child's freedom and holding its attention on certain things. The child is forced to concentrate its attention on the attributes of reality. Look here, listen to me, do not do that, do this. Once the attention span is captured, the child's perspective is sharply narrowed. Awareness is lost, and the individual sinks into a condition differing little from unconscious dreaming. In reality, when your attention is focused on a narrow range of objects, you walk as if your gaze was glued to your shoes, and so naturally, you do not look around you. The worldview template in turn places you in the Procrustean bed of false stereotypes which define how everything should be. In subconscious dreaming, the programming of attention and perception reaches its maximum level. The dreamer accepts the situation for what it is, suspecting that they are impotent to affect the course of events. As a result, the dreamer finds themselves utterly in the hands of circumstance. The dream happens to them, and there is nothing they can do about it. The script develops spontaneously in accordance with one's fears and expectations, which continue with one's thoughts in an uncontrollable flow. In lucid dreaming, the dreamer has a higher level of awareness and can affect the course of events with their willpower. As soon as the individual grasps the idea that it is all just a dream, they develop incredible capacities In conscious dreaming, there is nothing that cannot be accomplished. The dreamer can direct events and do inconceivable things such as fly, and all because their attention and perceptions are freed. It is as if the individual has lifted their head up, looked around, and became aware of their position. In waking, however, strange it might seem, one's level of awareness drops again. In the majority of cases, a person's thoughts fly spontaneously, jumping from one theme to another. The things that concern, worry, or irritate us are usually the things that control our consciousness, gnawing away at us one degree or another. It can be difficult to control the flow of thoughts, which, such as those, our worst expectations and negative knee-jerk reactions shape a person's reality. Irrespective of their will, perception and attention are held by problems, oppressive thoughts, and circumstances. As a result, a person becomes engrossed in their care like in a daydream. This is how we become grown-ups. A mature person considers a child irrational, and as far as they fail to fit with the dream. Naturally, the child has to learn how to survive in new conditions. Yet inevitably the paradox arises the more efficiently the child assimilates the rules of behavior within the narrow limits of the material world. The lower the level of awareness falls, which leads to a loss of capacity to influence the course of events and perceive the metaphysical side of reality. Grown-ups become prisoners of their own games and consequently of circumstances from the moment they begin to take themselves seriously, allowing their mind to become engrossed. The child, however, is the sole master of their game. They have a higher level of awareness because in every moment they know that it is all just a game. Likewise, the child keeps importance at a low level because they understand that it is just a game. The child acts dispassionately at the same time, observing like a spectator because again, they are aware that it is all just a game. There are no more games for adults though, for life is a very serious matter. On the one hand, this is true. On the other hand, this attitude changes human existence into an unconscious waking dream. Of course, the adult person is aware of the fact that in any given moment they are awake rather than asleep. Yet does that really change anything, for desires are not fulfilled? Dreams do not come true, and our worst expectations are confirmed, as if to spite us. Life unfolds randomly, and not in the way that we want it to. It turns out that the individual is master of their reality in lucid dreaming, and yet is impotent in waking. It is all relative. The ability to control your dreams comes from being aware of yourself inside a dream relative to physical reality. Now, there may be a misunderstanding with the teaching by Zeland when he says that lucid dreaming helps with attention energy. It's not that you need to become lucid in your dream. It's the process inside the dream, becoming aware that you're dreaming. So at this level of awareness, the individual has the support and reference point of reality to which they can return after they have awoken. Reality in turn is like an unconscious waking dream, in that life just happens. The individual does not remember their past. Lives do not have a point of reference relative to which they can step up to the next level of awareness. In lucid dreaming, you remember who you really are. You are the person seeing the dream. You understand that the moment you wake up, the dreams will disappear, but that you can also remain in the dream and direct it with the power of your intention. Until such time as you become aware that you are seeing a dream, and remember your point of reference, you are completely under the power of the dream. You are dependent on circumstances and closed in the box of conditioning. Reality differs from a dream in that you always return to it. In order to determine whether it is a dream or reality, you have to determine your point of reference, because both the dream and reality are relative. Dreams are not real relative to reality. Relative to what? Then is reality itself unreal? Where is the reference point for reality? When a person dies, they return to this initial reference point. But every time they are reborn, they forget their starting point and become engrossed in the new dream, the next life. If you could remember who you really are, you would become conscious of the fact that you are capable of directing this dream, the dream that is life. This is incredibly difficult to do, and the difficulty lies in the fact that you have to change the template of your worldview. It is like a kind of stencil that has been rubber stamped into your mind, making it impossible to correct or erase. All you can do is create an additional one, and this requires tearing your mind away from the former. The mind can be torn away from its previous template when it is altered state of consciousness, occurring during sleep or the part of psychotropic agents. In a normal state of consciousness, the heart and mind are synchronously attuned to a realized sector of the alternative space. The mind observes a material reality as if it were looking through a window. In a state of alcoholic or drug-related intoxication, the mind eases its grip of control, disturbing the synchronicity and allowing the soul to deviate to an unrealized area of the alternative space. As a result, a person is physically present in the real world but perceives it quite differently depending on the degree to which there is deviation from the former synchronicity. Simply put, a person under the influence of alcohol will find that their old familiar house or street has a weird look to it, like it is in a dream. This is because the person's mind observes the picture from close but unrealized sectors of the alternative space where the scenery is somewhat different. The content of these sectors can be anything. For example, a person simply cannot find the door because they cannot find it where it was before. The place might appear a total mess, as if it were totally redecorated or making it almost unrecognizable. People you know can also look entirely different. In reality, nothing has changed. It is just that the person sees unreal scenery because they are watching from a different area of the alternative space. In a non-lucid dreaming, the mind relaxes its control even further, which is why the soul flies into very distant sectors where the script and scenery are quite unimaginable. In these sectors, anything is possible, starting with cloud 9 in heaven, ending in the kind of hell that would make demons and cauldrons a day out of a health spa. The dreamer may end up in a technological world filled with huge clanking machinery, or they may find themselves in a world reminiscent of a slaughterhouse with nothing but dirt and piles of raw meat. You may end up lost in an unfamiliar city where all you can do is desperately walk the streets with no idea how you got there or where to go. People in such areas may be ugly and weird, and the animals wild and rabid. When you wake up from a dream like that, you experience a huge sense of relief. Thank God it was only a dream. And yes, it was a dream, but not an illusion in the normal sense of the word. An unrealized metaphysical reality. The scariest thing about it is that the dreamer sees all these virtual characters and can do whatever they want with them in accordance with their fears and expectations. God protect us from ever ending up in such a physical reality. When cosmonauts are in orbit, they apparently see quite unearthly dreams. For example, in his published diaries, Gennady Strekalov writes, "I have strange dreams. Sometimes I am filled with wonder, and I have no motivation or will to communicate. Clearly the brain, like a highly complex computer, malfunctions from exhaustion or receives external information from the planetary information field where everything is written and recorded for eternity. After experiencing dreams like this, that could never have originated from ordinary human consciousness, the Transurfing postulate on the existence of the alternative space would not have surprised this cosmonaut at all. A model of human perception is well described in the books of Carlos Castaneda and Theun Mares. Now here's where we get a reference to the plait in reality transurfing. Their model reflects the ideas of the Toltec, the last people to originate from Atlantis. According to their teachings, the human being is surrounded by a shining cocoon of energy, consisting of numerous threads. Somewhere in the area of the shoulder blades, the threads join in a single focus called an assemblage point. The position of the assemblage point determines the nature of your perception. Now the difference, the plait is like more of an energy cord. This is saying that the energy is not one cord, but several cords that come down from the top of your head and merge closer to the shoulder blades of your back. So if you combine the Toltec model with the concept of transurfing, you could say that when the assemblage points are in their customary position, a person perceives physical reality in its usual form. In this, physical reality coincides with the corresponding sector of the alternative space. If the point shifts to one side, the synchronicity is disturbed and a person is capable of perceiving unrealized area of the field. In most people, the position of the point is firmly fixed. However, when for various reasons the focus is disturbed and the points start to wander, a person develops clairvoyant skills. Naturally, our dreams are determined by shifts in the assemblage points. It is important that the focus of our perception not only shift to one side, but also return to its former position. Otherwise, if it gets stuck in an unnatural position, the mind undergoes changes that are ordinarily referred to as insanity. People who are capable of intentionally shifting their assemblage point can shape reality and are lucid dreamers. This ability appears of itself if you return to the point of reference relative to reality. If you are conscious of how you really are, this is not an easy task. You can count the people who have been known to reach enlightenment on the fingers of one hand. Reaching enlightenment is like being in a strange city, desperately wandering along narrow, winding streets, and then soaring high up into the sky, where you suddenly have a bird's eye view of everything below you. Like a line on the palm of your hand, the path to your goal becomes instantly obvious. I love that analogy. So transurfing will not lift you up to the height of the bird, but will show you a path you can walk along with your eyes closed. Similar to Jack Canfield's description in The Secret, where if you're driving in the dark and you have the headlights on, if you just simply follow the road and the headlights, you can get to your destination, which is what transurfing is trying to give us. To wake up in the dream, you have to have a reference point. You understand that it is a dream when you remember that there is another reality, a true reality. Your reference point can be the knowledge that in life you can raise your consciousness up a rung, or at the very least half a rung, and that this of itself is quite something. Imagine that you're walking along a street, talking to someone or going about your day-to-day chores. Wake up, look around, and with a sober mind observe what is happening. That comes from Tufti the Priestess. Wake up and see reality. See yourself. You are capable of setting your world in the right direction with the power of intention. The result will not be like a dream in which the storyline changes fluidly, submitting to the slightest movement of your will. Material realization is inert like tar, but it can be manipulated nonetheless through the principles of transurfing. The first thing you have to do is wake up. Be aware that reality is like a dream. Only in lucid dreaming can you fully control the situation. When you are daydreaming, you are not in control of the situation. You are battling with pendulums. Come down into the auditorium and observe. Behave dispassionately, rent yourself out, and remain the observer. Now, that's interesting. Abraham would tell you that daydreaming is good, but in this case, when you are daydreaming, you are not in control of the situation. And I think what he's saying is different from the daydreams that Abraham talks about, where you're thinking about positive things. In this case, the daydream is just being in a dreamlike state. Before dispassionately rent yourself out and remain the observer. In order to retain your level of awareness, it is essential to keep consistent control of the flow of your thoughts. When this becomes a habit, it is automatic and requires no effort. For once you've woken up in your dreams and you no longer have to make any effort to maintain the awareness that it is all a dream, you can learn to control the flow of your thoughts in the same way. At first, though, you have to systematically call yourself to wake up before it becomes a habit. When in waking you remember that you are supposed to be acting dispassionately, you become conscious, i.e. you come down from the stage into the auditorium, or you remain on stage as a participating spectator. This is the half rung of awareness that is enough to carry out the other transurfing principles, the most important of which are to reduce your importance level, to go with the alternative's flow, and coordination. These principles enable you to move confidently through the labyrinth of life, avoiding all sorts of problems, even with your eyes closed. Further on, in reality transurfing, you will learn more about the powerful instruments you can use to shape your reality, which is the dual mirror referred to before. We round up this topic with one more question. If somewhere in the alternative space there is a point of reference prior to your current life, relative to which reality seems a dream, then what would mark the origin of this initial reference point? Obviously, God Almighty Himself. The soul of every living being is a part of God. Every life is a dream. You could continue to ask, is there an initial reference point for God Himself? Let those who like to be nourished by hope struggle with this question. It is the same as asking whether anything exists beyond the visible universe. We can never know, just as butterflies collecting nectar in Africa cannot know that there is such a place as America and that flowers grow there too. Is not our world wonderful enough? Why should we constantly demand an explanation to everything from it? Then would we simply enjoy the nectar of flowers we can reach. So I really like the discussion in this, and you can start to see where Zeland is coming up with the ideas for the plait, for Tufti the Priestess, and the discussions and techniques that are discussed in that book, which is considered an advanced form of transurfing. And this is a later chapter of the book. There's only 2 more. It's Mirror World and the Gatekeeper to Eternity. So it's very interesting. The idea of the alternative space is better understood in this context. A lot of the stuff we talk about in this has been talked about repeatedly. In the book Reality Transurfing, a lot of these concepts are repeatedly talked about. I believe in many ways the book is designed that way as a form of education. If you go through the chapters one by one, the ideas are reinforced. You find yourself going through a change just because of the repetition of some of these concepts. But these are different concepts than you've heard in other reality creation texts and manuals. And I think it's very interesting and helpful. And it's just stuff that's interesting to think about past lives and why we don't remember, and the way that the world reflects back to us, and the kind of dream that we're in, and what are the implications of it. We are possibly in a second kind of dream, some kind of second dream. Are we in the Matrix? Are we just sitting on some spaceship connected by cord to the back of our head, and we're existing in this Matrix? We will never know. But if anybody thinks that we are in the Matrix, put that down. We certainly are in some kind of dreamlike reality. But the alternative space that's available has some incredible realities, and you can access these states by not only dreaming, but going into dreamlike settings. You can receive, and as if you go back and listen to my episode on Neville Goddard's How to Meditate, when he's talking about how to meditate, he's saying that it's basically good because it's a lot like sleep. It's bringing you to a state that's very similar to what you're experiencing before you go to sleep and when you wake up. So the idea is that meditation can bring you into that lucid dreaming state, and that can be helpful in understanding the way that you're interacting with the universe. Understand that you have your 5 senses, as they talk about in Kabbalah, and the outer world. There's these other outer realities that are interacting with us right now, our 5 senses don't know about. And so, or they're filtered through a screen to us that end up being different from what they really are. And so a lot of what we're doing is we're in this little box with just a limited number of filters to understand this world around us that is we're maneuvering through, and we're limited to our senses. And there's information that are way outside of our senses. Obviously, we can't see an infrared, we can't see X-rays, but these other things are all around us. And so part of this process is moving our reference point and our observational awareness outside into a non-local area. It's very fascinating. It's a great chapter to ponder and think about. You are transurfing in a waking dream right now. So choose to fly if you want to. Your intention is just as powerful as in a lucid dream. It may take a little bit longer. And remember, the mirror makers don't like it when you look directly at them. You can glance to them from the side, but you can create your own reality. You can do this. You can do it with these concepts. You can follow a path that will get you from point A to point B by avoiding pendulums, reducing importance, coordinating the heart and mind, you begin to see magic all around you. You start to work in conjunction with outer intention with God, and amazing things will begin to happen for you. It is just amazing the kind of results that I've seen with people that I've coached, people that I've worked with, people that make comments on my videos, people that make comments on my Facebook group. The kind of changes and results that we've seen. People are obviously excited about this because it works. And that's what I'm telling you to do is, don't take my word for it. Learn these concepts and play around with them. Find your own path, but be aware that you are interfacing with the universe around you. And you are in what is essentially a waking dream. And now you can wake up from that waking dream. You can activate that assemblage point. You can activate that plait. You can focus in on your energies, and you can upload a brand new script into your reality. A brand new script that's already there in the alternative space. And you can begin to act out this brand new script. Just go with the flow of it. You don't have to battle it. Just go with the flow of it. It's there for you. And now, with this knowledge, your life will be magical and fun. So many good things are about to follow when you apply this information. If you need help, let me know, and maybe I can coach you you can go to my website at advancedsuccessinstitute.com. All episodes of The Reality Revolution can be found at therealityrevolution.com. As always, it is a joy to share this wonderful knowledge with you. Can't wait to talk to you again soon. And welcome to The Reality Revolution.